Okay. I mean, that's what we need. We need to make magic happen.
So my notes, one of the talks is squares make a circle.
Squares.
So there you go.
I think you would need to show that.
You
to
need
the
to
audience.
show it.
It's
Show
video
the
recorded.
handwriting.
So-
Yeah.
Isn't that? That's
I
like
do
one of the
remember last
heresies.
time we actually...
Down, lower.
Last time we did actually take artful pictures of your rather interesting notes every single day and use them as the thumbnail for the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the serial killer, like what's that, the Zodiac killer notes?
No, I don't. I mean, if you want to call James the... I mean, I don't think James is
Hit
that
my notes on the
organized.
talk, Brendan.
Brendan, is that
It takes a lot of effort to be a
Okay.
serial
Brendan
killer.
spoke.
Okay.
Oh,
James didn't listen.
Brendan spoke, and they didn't want me to take questions.
we needed to stay on track. Like for Blair Van Valkenburg's talk, my notes are carnivores, exclamation mark, and then that is a beefy wolf.
That is a very beefy wall.
Is it an absolute unit?
Yes. I want to describe a sauropod, genus name absolute, species name unit.
Why can't you do that for a Euryptid? Like a
Because sauropods are bigger.
well, relative.
Also, I'm not going to pollute my own taxon.
Enrich.
Rich.
Enrich. It's all perspective.
So that means welcome to day 3.
But what you should do is the next person to describe anything, call the genus graboid.
No. No. No.
Especially if it doesn't make any sense.
Especially
I'll
if
find
it's
you.
Precambrian.
No. I'll find you.
Especially if you know it's a junior synonym.
I'm done. I quit.
I make copious notes about a talk that says do not tweet or Facebook, so I can talk about that in very broad
Oh yeah, I
terms.
did that too. I have the do not tweet or Facebook talk.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't have that one either.
Like they announced that at the beginning.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
see
that
that
little.
I can cover most of it and just
Yeah.
show it says don't talk on podcast.
Wait, really?
Why?
Yeah, because
Well,
if
we
you
can read the abstract because that's out there.
yeah.
I guess.
What was this talk?
I don't know. What's it? I have to look up the abstract and see what I'm allowed to say.
I see a cool word.
I'd say
Otherwise, we're gonna get shot by snipers.
it's level Sevron in the Jurassic of France, which is fine to say.
Because that's in the title.
Yeah, and there's some
Yeah.
very cool squid.
Oh, okay.
They have internal soft parts, and maybe our knowledge of squid phylogeny is fucking bullshit.
Okay.
But not a squid.
Who gave this talk?
Not a
it's
squid.
And not squid.
Not a squid.
Not squid.
So a person
an
that was not a
octopode.
squid gave this talk.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
No, but it's about a taxon.
She is
that's
neither
not
a squid nor a kid.
Oh, okay. Okay.
From,
Now?
I haven't seen many children
Splatoon.
giving talks. But
It's
I
a
mean-
game. What?
Nothing.
You pointing at me? Okay,
rude.
I saw that.
Rude.
I apologised for being... Last year I apologised for being ableist. And he was like, being short is not a disability.
I'm an inch and a half too tall to qualify as it being a disability.
Really?
I feel like at this...
You guys just have to accept that I do twice as many steps as you. When we
Fair.
walk
You're
down
going to
the
work out
corridor.
more, that's good.
But I'm still fat.
So I saw a 3D printed model of some cephalopod stuff that was kind of awesome, and I think I was probably
Which
the only
one?
one in this group that went to see that one.
I didn't.
Was that they looked at the nautiloids and the orthocones, and they were trying to find their neutral buoyancy, and also try and use those 3D models to determine how quickly some of those the orthocones in particular, could return to their original stability.
Oh, I saw the back of that through a door.
Yeah, so the cool thing with nautiloids is that they can actually kind of position themselves around pretty easily. And one of the things that they showed is that, so they 3D printed these models of nautiloids now to try and sort of simulate, putting in gases and liquids to try and get neutral buoyancy. Now the interesting thing with that though is that the internal structures of these shells are so complex you can't necessarily perfectly get at it. So what they did instead is they kind of did a more simplified model, but then they had sort of a ballast weight inside of it that was positioned specifically so as to sort of function as both the weight of the organism and also the extra weight of the internal shell material that they can't actually deal with. And then they had a pipe in and a pipe out so they could pump in liquid, pump in gas, and keep it neutrally buoyant. And so they got it to the point where it was sitting in its standard life position.
Okay.
And then they were like, okay, what happens if we screw it with it? And just kind of pump it, hit it. And it goes whoop, 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 whoop. And then
Is there a
kind of
video of this?
very quickly, yes. And then eventually very
Does it make
quickly
that
stabilizes. And if you follow the actual motion, it's a sort of perfect, a pendulum swing. where it goes wide and then slowly friction stabilizes it. And so it's like, okay, well, this is a cool strategy because in this case, clearly nautiloids want to be able to rotate themselves. They want to have that ability to bend along that axis, but at the same time, you want to still be able to kind of adjust if something jostles you. So they adjust fairly quickly, but it's not so rigid that they can't do anything else. Okay. Compared to orthocones, which we interpret as kind of being relatively straight up in the air, if you start messing with those, they almost immediately bounce right back. So their suggestion was they don't have that kind of parabolic swing to them, so they're probably less likely to be able to kind of move in more horizontal directions, and so likely what they're doing is mostly moving up and down fast vertical, not really moving all that fast side to side.
Until they went too deep and then the pressure crushed them.
And so as a result then they're suggesting this is kind of a cool idea of some limitations of that particular strategy.
Okay.
Did they do it with heteromorphs?
No, they did not do it with heteromorphs.
But a lot of the heteromorphs are thought to,
Free plankton.
Yeah.
just to kind of hang out.
But that's what you gotta those are kind of the paradigms that you gotta make classic models for.
And so
You
you
can't
could-
let that just be the paradigm.
Yeah.
Well, there's some isotope data to support some of it.
But plastic printing.
Plastic printing, we can spin them around.
And like
See
they
what
went
happens.
through all the details of like it's plastic, it's clearly on the same material, like so we're doing this to try and balance out the weight, and we've run the methods, and we've got an actual Nautilus shell, so we can try and make it so the center of gravity and the weight distribution is the same, even though we're not dealing with the same material.
I mean, but it could be a bit of future evolutionary research when the cephalopods of the future just take the most abundant chemical in the ocean to secrete into their shells, and so they do in fact have plastic shells.
Oh,
I'm sure
okay.
there's something that agglutinates that has plastic in it.
Oh,
Now, right?
I'm sure.
Like, can we at least get?
Like all the snails that make up the treasure
Yeah.
snails.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's bits
Or
of big shell.
caddisflies. There's got to be
Yeah,
a caddisfly that
caddisflies.
really
You
produces
can
really
You've seen the
polluted
jewelry.
river.
Yes.
jewelry. Yeah.
Yeah, but there has to be like a really sad version of that
you wanna
somewhere.
know
where
a
there's
real-
polluted
Made of trash,
river
made of
with
plastic bags.
trash
I mean,
caddisflies.
well, I mean, like
it's
the
Probably
hermit,
it's happening in the center of the Pacific Gyre, for being
like
completely
the hermit
honest.
crabs that live in a bottle.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
the
I think I'm
crabs,
just
yeah.
remembering that caddisflies are indicators of good water quality, so
Yeah.
maybe that's not.
Yeah.
They're
you
in
wanna
trout
know-
streams.
If you want to know something really sad, there was a paper came out a few months ago showing that mosquito larvae were ingesting plastic, metamorphosing into mosquitoes, being eaten by birds, and passing that plastic on into the birds.
Oh.
So-
Food
I mean, that's also how methylated mercury makes its way through ecosystems, James.
Yeah,
Don't
people
eat the tuna.
know that one.
I had tuna yesterday.
Don't eat too much of it.
Can I get it as long as it's mixed 50-50 dolphin?
Well, I mean, the dolphin.
The dolphin
clearly.
That's
should
not
be
better.
just as bad.
Worse.
I don't know,
Yeah, 'cause-
dolphin
'cause-
and
no,
tuna, aren't they
as you-
Are
similar?
they at the same trophic level?
No,
Yeah.
yeah, they probably are. I think
Yeah,
I don't
tuna,
think they-
tuna are rough. They're like
Yeah.
giant.
they're big.
So-
they're big.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you go up trophic scale, you're going to concentrate in your mercury.
So I went to a couple interesting talks this
What
morning.
did you see in that?
So this was in the New Voices in Geobiology session.
Oh, did you see Greg
Oh.
Metallic sing a song?
Greg Metallic sang a song.
He sang a song at the end of his talk.
Apparently I missed the most exciting one
I didn't
then.
know I should do that.
No.
I mean, should is a
Yeah.
strong.
I only know
term,
this
really.
because Kathy tweeted it.
Did they-
Okay, but you saw
But
it.
you saw it
But I
later
saw it
in
on
that
the talk.
session.
Yeah.
And so one of these was a do not tweet,
Yeah.
but the thing in common is that they were using CT scanning to create 3D morphologies of these different creatures. And so the really interesting one was this Ediacaran sponge fossil. And so they did end up using a destructive method in which they ground it. They ground through the fossil and took pictures of it, but then used machine learning to differentiate the matrix from the fossil material. And so they could create a 3D model of it and test whether they thought it was actually a sponge or not based on the structure. So I thought that was interesting.
What they decide.
They decided it was not a sponge because the baffles, as they called them, were too far apart to allow water movement through for the little, what are those, the collar, like the little...
Yeah, the collar
The
cell.
collar
the
cell,
collar
yeah.
cells to collect out of the water column. So they decided it was not a sponge, but perhaps like these vertical fin-like things that had structures in between them to support them. But apparently they just grew out of cracks in these original reef building events. So I thought that was interesting.
That's very cool. So Carlie, you said that you didn't see all that much. Was there anything in
Wait,
particular?
don't put me on the spot right now.
Okay,
Let me look at
wait,
the app. Let me look at the app.
You can think. James, what did you see?
The thing we can't talk about,
Okay.
which was cool. I mean, it was very cool. They're CT scanning things, and we talked about it. That also they have horny rings was something that came up in that talk.
Did you just write
Yeah.
down horny rings?
Yes.
No,
Okay.
also
yeah,
have
but we're
horny
not allowed
rings.
to talk about
Sure
it.
as hell did.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So the first talk, I think I'll probably talk about.
Did you see chords?
Yeah. Did you see Curt?
Shut up. I did, but we were working on our talks in the back of the room while that was happening.
Shame. Also came in like, but I did see the second half of it.
Yeah.
There was ecological niche modeling that happened.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, that was definitely what that
There was
talk
ecological. I mean, if
That's
you're
the
just going to
title.
talk about the very end, there's ecological niche modeling that maybe detected the two things that were suspected of being different species were different species.
That
which
was cool.
Yeah.
Taxonomic
Yeah.
implications of niche modeling.
But it was also a comparison as to whether or not niches were consistent across multiple time bins, or whether or not they had some sort of change
Yeah.
across those time bins.
But it was completely different.
Oh,
and
well, that
other
one was
people were
completely
already
different.
suspicious of it.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
like it was undermining
No.
hypothesis testing. It was just hard because they need
Doing it, aren't
more. They need more Danian outcrop.
How did you do this?
Danian
I didn't see you
outcrop.
doing anything.
Or some, I don't know how you're doing it, but good job.
So for the record, Anna's just sending James non-stop shrimp emojis.
Hang
Oh,
on.
I know.
She's texted someone to text him.
No, it's coming from her. But up the game. Here, have some
It's
crabs.
time.
So they need more of an outcrop.
The
Okay,
shrimp
so
seem more
James,
outcrops?
talk about a talk round 2.
Okay, so the first talk in our session was Natalia Bykova talking about macroalgae in the Proterozoic, looking at the Ediacaran and other time periods. How do you paste?
Just hold the
And
button
War
down.
of the Shrimp.
no, I've got a Samsung.
Yeah, I got a Samsung.
So can I just end it, because we didn't actually finalize what that talk said, because it was not just about that species. It was the fact that if we take a look at most of the species across the Cretaceous interseaway, they show niche evolution in response to environmental change, suggesting that the assumption of a static niche conservatism across the lifespan of a species is probably an oversimplification. Fascinating extra complication of that is that the change tended to be in a constriction in response to environmental stress, suggesting not that things are necessarily like evolving towards the stress, but having their range constricted. Cool.
Yay!
My friend randomly added "and" in between, so it's just a bunch of crabs, then "and" then more crabs.
I appreciate that this is where we're going.
I know.
Yeah.
I like the niche
Clearly-
modeling
When we
talk.
when we
It's
started
clearly
this
day 3.
when we started this 5 years ago, I really thought eventually we would come to a moment where we'd just be talking about crabs all the. But not quite like this. Not quite like
Well, I think
this.
I did see a crab talk a couple days ago.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was about the evolution of crab morphology.
Right.
And becoming elongate versus
Yes, and they
wide,
can
and
apparently
how they
walk
can move
one
around,
way.
and that walk 2 ways.
Yep.
I didn't know
They can be
lobsters can only walk one way. I
Yeah.
learned that.
Yeah, we.
But they
That
also
was the
do
first
the
day.
escape thing with their tails.
Are you kidding me? Now you just went to Stalin.
Lobsters also do the escape thing
This-
though, so they can move
What can you
both
drink out
ways.
of
They
here?
just
Which cup
swim
is
the
yours?
other
Is
way.
that bottle yours?
Please breathe, James.
James,
I
A,
need
please
you to
breathe. And
live.
James, also B, please stop sending random gifts to
Oh my
people.
god, this is like when they have a family around, like.
Well, so that's what I'm thinking is like with this particular picture, we just need like a turkey right in the center of this.
Okay, and then
And
next
we have the
year,
most weird
Yeah.
Norman Rockwell
next
painting
year we
ever.
do the Last Supper.
So we replicate the picture that I wanted to take at dinner.
Yeah.
Max still needed to be Judas.
Yeah. It could be like a little cherub in the back.
That works.
Next year it could be John the Baptist.
At the Last Supper,
Yes.
It's
they
not.
kept him around a few years after he was beheaded. Then
No, it's just a skull.
just hanging out. I don't remember
This is
that
a
in the
combination of
painting,
Hamlet.
but
Yes,
it's
yes.
probably like.
A2, John.
I mean, there's
We'll
a
throw in some
memento
Julius Caesar
mori
all around.
tradition,
It's like,
maybe.
yeah, now you're going through
Yeah.
this.
Oh boy.
Okay, yeah, no.
So,
John didn't make it to that
microalgae
dinner.
are
Yes.
real. This some really amazing talks.
So macroalgae are often ignored, and they're present in the Proterozoic, and they're really common in the Ediacaran, but nobody talks about them being in the Ediacaran, which is fair because I didn't know they were in the Ediacaran, and nobody talks about it.
What's their preservation like?
Pretty good.
No, what's the preservation method? Like, how are they preserved?
Flattened.
So carbonaceous films?
Yeah.
Okay.
Were you interested for a second? Like, oh, I
Yeah.
could acid etch them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there was a talk the other day that I talked about where maybe they were graptolites, but they weren't. Anyway, so this is using NMDS, which means multi-dimensional scaling, and N means something.
Non-metric multidimensional scaling.
Yes.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be NMMN?
Non-metric is one
Non-metric is one
Yeah.
word.
That's two.
Oh.
It's
Well,
hyphened.
In the
Yeah,
case of
it's
this thing,
In
it's-
this thing,
Hyphen is punctuation, not making a word.
but that's that's how they abbreviated it.
Okay.
It's, yeah.
that's how they chose to do the initialism.
Okay, and so they're doing present absent data for 30 morphological characters. They've got over 2,000 specimens, about half of which are from the Ediacaran. And basically looking at the expansion of morphospace throughout the Proterozoic, and it actually reaches its peak in the Ediacaran, then plateaus, and then rises again in the Silurian. What?
No.
Stop.
I'm listening. They
Rises-
reached
no,
a
I
peak
see
in
your
it.
phone is on. Rises again in the Silurian. But the only significant change and disparity is from the Tonian to the Cryogenian, and then from the Cambrian to the Ordovician. And so algae become ecologically important in the Cryogenian, but then the amount of functional forms really increases around the same time where molecular clock data suggests that animals evolved. So we see the algae responding to animal evolution even though we don't have that record of animal evolution, and then they do it again from the Cambrian to the Ordovician as we start getting modern ecosystems forming and more variety of like what animals are doing starts happening. So we're actually seeing algae respond to sort of animals even when we're not having animals sort of preserved. So that was really, really cool.
So you can use them as a proxy for animals.
Oh yeah, 'cause they're going to be
What?
grazing on the algal mats is the presumption.
What
Yeah.
environment are these supposed to represent? Like what sort of like shore face, deeper water?
So I imagine that it's like photic zone, like shallow marine, not too.
but they didn't like
but
talk.
There
No,
wasn't
so-
any specific
so-
because it was actually looking at like across multiple times.
So the
Okay.
one thing that they did say was that the more sort of morphotypes you get and the more complex morphotypes are then found in more extreme environments. So the other thing is that algae are in non-extreme environments and then kind of pushed into
Yeah.
extreme environments. And then the other thing was that the functional diversity is really high at the start of the Ediacaran, and then it drops throughout the Ediacaran as if
Yeah.
they're being just murdered. And so this
Well, they are.
yeah, and so this Ediacaran extinction is real in algae as well in like the weirder Ediacaran organisms. So that was really cool.
Which I saw a poster also about a biotic replacement of the Ediacaran, and it's basically
Yeah.
suggesting that everything now, except for they don't have isotopic signatures that suggest it, but almost everything else is just suggesting that the increases in shifts in both functional groups and also trace fossils across these are suggesting a basic competitive replacement
Mhm.
of the Ediacaran microbial mats.
Yeah. So that's my notes for the day.
All of them?
More or less. I mean,
Well, we could talk about Jocelyn's talk.
yeah,
When the lights went out.
yeah.
When the lights went out.
I read that paper, so I actually can retain what I also
Yeah.
saw there.
Gotcha.
So the lights went out and it was a dark time.
Yeah, it was a dark time.
Yeah.
The
Carl
stars were also
Brett showed
black,
up.
so
Yeah.
And
it's glowing in the darkness. That was a
Yeah.
good recovery, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know that I would.
She
I would
kept
do that
going.
to
The
Go
second,
look
the second
out
time
and
in that
picked out who
room.
did
Yeah, who
it.
did it?
Yeah.
everyone in the room called him out immediately. Well, first it was just black, and it made the slide look really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So everyone
yeah.
was fine for a minute. And then she said, "I don't think that I did that." And then
Just
everyone
calm and
looked
collected.
back and went, "Carl."
It's okay, it's just my thesis advisor.
So he turned the lights back on.
Mhm. Which is a better recovery than the other day, apparently.
Yes, when poor James had his, not this James, different
Yes.
James, had the lights go on, then off. And then
I wouldn't be able to proceed through
be
that.
just constantly
Especially when I've got,
flickering
like-
back and forth between on and off while they couldn't make them slightly
Yeah.
dim.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can even tell you where in the talk that was because I wrote down, and now Carl Brett on special effects.
It was right at the time when she showed all of the ranges of all of the isotope values, the temperature values.
And
all the different
it was like a
temperatures.
neon color scheme on black, so it made it look much clearer.
Good slides.
Yeah, and it was temperatures in supposedly planktic things that are colder than the benthos. So there was all sorts of discussion of what that would mean for why you would get oxygen isotopes indicating colder temperatures than the bottom.
Yeah.
I think the interpretation is like taphonomy, right?
No,
Paper.
what I mean it was
taphonomy.
it was a tamonym, but it was more an energetics of the rate of shell secretion was faster in the cephalopods or cephalopods, depending on who's reading the paper. However you want it pronounced, James. You are clearly the center of this podcast.
I say cephalic. Well, I say cephalic. Well, it depends. Cephalic is fine. It's a German,
Cephalo.
obviously Greek word.
Okay.
What did you see today?
So when I was looking through my notes, I was like, oh, there's a paleo talk, but it was your guys' talk. But I did see they did, I know, they did some,
Palynological.
yes, thank you, work on the coals in the Illinois basin.
Oh.
So that was cute.
Was there a coal gap?
No, I don't get it.
It's okay. It's only a joke that only Amanda will get. And when she
Okay.
listens to this about 3 months later, she'll just yell at her computer for a little while. Yeah, and then say, well, you never let me live that down.
Well, that is
Oh,
good, I think.
in Remy Ravelli's talk, did you see that?
I didn't see the response. It's a bad friend.
Okay, well, just for just Carlie and not for the rest of the world. At some point, the Turritella suitable habitat area went to 100%.
Oh, he told me about that. Friends, the cephalopods.
So wait, so
Tell us
we
to
hit
live
100%
everywhere.
suitable habitat?
Yeah, that's in some region, all of the habitat that was preserved suddenly became 100% Turritella habitat.
Oh my god, they're coming.
They've already arrived.
Oh.
But the ones in the Pacific.
It was Gulf. It was the
Yeah.
it was the survivors for KPG on the Gulf coastal plain versus the Atlantic coastal plain. And at some point, the Atlantic coastal plain just went to 100% of this is good for Turritella.
So Brendan,
And I asked him if they expanded to fit that area, and he doesn't know yet.
Yeah, they did.
you did the reconnaissance work though. You went to see whether or not Steve Stanley's talk actually leaned into.
Yeah.
I did because there was a chance, and so this talk was. I need the title. Can you read the title? Because you have the book on your lap.
Oh wait, where was that? Yes.
Afternoon in the morphology and development.
Yes. I even remember where it is on the page. I just need to find it.
Well, it was trial by
We
Geno
can't
Spines.
spoil this. It was the
Oh right.
It was Genospines.
Genospines functioned to allow trilobites to right themselves after being overturned. Stanley.
And this was clearly a mistake. And the slide that he showed at the initial did not include Stanley. And he did not leave it up for more than a quarter second. As soon as he had the slide selector, he continued on. And he did not comment on this or make any jokes about it or anything. So I
No.
left, and I was told by someone who shall remain anonymous, well, he wouldn't make a joke. He hasn't made a joke at GSA, as far as I know.
That's fair. That's fair.
So that lost opportunity. I could have been like Mr. DNA. It could have been the whole thing. Could have been his PowerPoint talking to him.
I mean, here's the thing. It's fine. That is an approach to take. And again, the joke here is more on the fact that the automated process of GSA let that happen.
I love it.
Yeah.
I can't believe it,
So-
except I can.
Yeah. So people just trusted his talk title and didn't question him about it.
We'll have to be better session.
Yes, we will have to be better session co-conveners. If you're listening to this podcast before February 1st, please consider submitting to do we have a title?
No, because we have to combine our
Yeah, we have to
sessions, so-
combine our sessions. So title to be announced.
Wait, you have 2 separate sessions already that now you're going to combine?
That are being combined. Carlie and I had one, and it's being combined with.
Kathleen Ritterbush's session on functional morphology. So we're combining our functional morphology biomineralization with her functional morphology.
So there's going to be a functional morphology session at NEPC, and you should come, and it'll have a title, I swear.
It'll be called the functional group.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
it's called-
function.
Yeah.
It'll work well.
Yeah.
By Funk Morph Bio.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
But no,
With a
we
K.
have,
Yeah.
because it was
Yeah.
2 sessions
Yeah.
combined,
George Clinton is
we have
literally
like
involved.
5 invited speakers that have all agreed to come already, so grab the remaining
Yeah, grab the
slots.
remaining 5 slots.
Yes, Funkadelic.
But
It's
our
okay.
posters
It
are
will be
cool.
Funkadelic.
Were you thinking Bill Clinton when I said George Clinton?
No, I briefly thought that for a second. I
totally thought Bill Clinton.
What?
no, I knew it was
George
George.
Dog.
I didn't know which word the K was going into.
Oh.
So I was like, what? There's
I-
no K in that word.
Before I took up ad space in the podcast, what were we gonna say? We talked about
We
Stanley,
talked about Stanley.
Stanley. Yeah, I was curious.
but I left right after he didn't do anything funny with that. To go back to your session.
It's unfortunate. I feel bad. I mean, again, I understand why.
Well, you guys were parents of a session today.
Yeah, we were.
We talked about one of them.
You co-parented very well.
He
you
was
know.
absent for the start.
I mean, that's,
Hey,
that's
that
how it
wasn't his
happens
fault.
sometimes, but
Some of us have to go away to conferences, even if we have children. Like, sometimes we have to go to a meeting.
How can I
It doesn't
miss?
mean we don't love you.
How can I miss you if you
Ellie.
leave?
No, today was the first time I got a long chunk of time to talk to my daughter at GSA,
Aw.
so
How old is she now?
7.
My God, are you serious?
yes.
Yes.
She's like fully fledged out on her
Uh-huh.
own.
Yeah.
She
At,
wants-
at this point, she could leave the nest. Like,
Fly, Ellie, fly.
No.
If
She
this
Please
was a
was
don't,
dragon.
please don't shove her out of the
I
window.
would never. I would never.
She is a wonderful child, and she still needs to be in the nest for a few more years.
Mhm.
Like at least 10.
yeah. Legally, at least 10.
11. That's how we work in this
17 when I
country.
went to college.
Okay, I guess she could do that.
Yeah, it was
but
too.
she's still a minor.
That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I did appeal, talking of ages, I did appeal to priority in my talk today, and I said, well, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. So.
Well, the best part is watching Blair Van Valkenburg give us like a wry smile and a wink.
Yeah.
like a sure,
We
10 years.
talk
kid.
about her talk. It was great.
Yeah.
Blair's talk was awesome.
Yeah, there was a beefy wolf. Like, beefy.
Absolute unit.
2 underlines. A real beefy wolf. And I don't know if it was like a real wolf or just a drawing of a wolf with really
I feel like my
beefy, like,
association with this
giant
podcast is
arms.
just detrimental
But
to
it was
everything
like-
involved.
Yeah, it was just like dog, wolf, beefy
Wolf.
wolf.
No, I did appreciate it. It was all. I don't even think dog. I think it started like basically like little coyote thing,
Yeah.
then dog, then wolf,
Yeah.
then dire wolf that decided to take some steroids and never skip a leg day.
Yeah, but only the
Besides
front
nightmare
legs.
fodder, what
Like
is
it
that?
lifted. It wasn't jogging. It was lifting.
About hypercarnivory
Yes.
and macroevolutionary consequences.
Yeah.
Well, and hypocarnivory too.
And hypocarnivory,
Which
which
we
apparently
get
is
to-
also bad.
We get to go back to pandas.
Pandas.
One of the favorite shapes of your particular
Wait, there were panda
oeuvre.
wolves? Is that
No,
what
no,
it
no,
is?
No,
they're
they-
hypocarnivores.
So hypercarnivore means you exclusively go to meat.
Yes.
Hypocarnivore means you exclusively go towards veggies.
Yeah,
Well,
so that's
funny-
the thing. Were there panda, like, veggie eating dogs? This is what I'm asking.
No, it was across
No,
all
pandas.
carnivores.
Oh,
so
all the
pandas,
things. Oh,
Yeah.
really
were the
pandas.
things.
It's
Okay,
not
sorry.
a joke.
I thought we were still talking about wolves.
Ratchets. And
It's,
hypercarnivory has an
It gets
evolution.
beefy and then it just
Gotcha.
starts drinking nothing but like green.
Soy milk.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the problem is once you start getting that lifter
Bamboo,
culture,
bamboo.
you take
Yeah.
all those power, the protein powers, and you keep drinking that, and all of a sudden you're going to these clubs, you keep
Protein.
drinking more protein powders. You know it's bad for you, but you just kind of keep doing it, getting bigger, a little bit more swole, and eventually you'd have a heart attack about the age of 35.
Yeah.
Poor pandas.
And that's more or less the evolutionary history of hypercarnivory.
I mean, pandas are kind of bad though.
Well, that was
Why
that
are
was
not
a
as dumb
conclusion
as
as well.
koalas, so.
No, but yeah, but that's because all koalas have syphilis, and that gets into the brain eventually.
Yeah, I know, but at least pandas pandas can like recognize their food when it's off a tree.
I mean, pandas will eat a dead deer if they find it. But
This is a lot. How many more shrimp are there?
no, this is one of the shrimp.
There's plenty of shrimp in the sea.
This is.
Actually, maybe.
Oh, you're gonna get.
There's plenty of shrimp.
You're
in
getting
this
Luigi
one
now.
pan where
So
we
okay,
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
just throwing gifts at each other. But the key point here is that, my joke aside, the point of hypercarnivory and what you were saying was that there's an evolutionary ratchet. There's a selective advantage towards getting larger, getting beefier, and eating a lot more meat because it gives you a more protein advantage and you can take down bigger prey. Less things are going to try and hit you. Problem is, now all of a sudden, you're the big guy on the block, you can have a very low biomass and low population because if you have too many of them, you're going to kill all the prey species.
But also, like.
And you're restricted on your prey because you can't go
You
for small
can't go for
things
anything
Yeah.
smaller
Yeah.
anymore because
Right.
now that you're big, because anything small is basically a little snack. It's
Kinda
not
like
you
when-
have a bad day, you're very
It's like
Yeah.
when you onto the crack, you don't cut it anymore, and so you need the harder drugs in order to keep getting that
And
hit.
that's why you start gassing, brother, and you start going the Hulk Hogan route. And I mean, okay, that's
So Hulk Hogan's back now. He could sue us. So.
yeah, fair enough.
Okay, all right.
moving on.
But the actual point, without overextended metaphor, being that once you're over 21 kilograms, apparently that's the magical threshold that's been demonstrated empirically. You can't chase small things anymore because you use more energy catching the mouse than you can get from eating the mouse.
Unless
Yes.
you're a human, where you shoot the mouse with a gun.
I asked her about humans afterwards, and we talked for a little bit about this. And
Okay.
she said, "Yeah, humans just cheat,
Yep,
and
We
so
put on
we-
traps.
Yeah, humans cheat. We're I guess we could be on that.
So tool use pops you out of 21 kilograms.
No, but also we could be on that end of the trajectory because we can still eat lots of
We're
plants.
also
You
really
can-
not hyper.
Carlie's evidence clearly that you
Yeah.
could still live on plants,
Yeah,
but
and do quite well.
Yeah.
the
Lots of
the-
peanut butter.
hominins,
Thank you.
if you think about it, fit this really well because we're clearly in the decline. Our diversity's gone from like 17 to just the one of us
Right.
in the last.
And it wasn't the robust ones that
Yeah.
lived either.
So
the ones that
we
were
fit this really
hyper-specialized.
well,
Died out.
except for that we still have big molars.
Yeah, remind me about it. My last one erupted very recently.
I'm sorry.
So the idea here is that hypercarnivory might be an evolutionary dead end that has selective advantages in the short term. So then you
Yeah.
basically end up with a ratchet where you go towards one direction, but it's ultimately off a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's something we talked about because we talked about this paper before. But the interesting thing that she's done is done some she had a student do a lot more detailed studies and also looking at the other end of the spectrum, your hypocarnivores, and seeing species duration based upon hypercarnivory and hypocarnivory. And as these carnivores lose their ability to eat meat, they also go off a cliff.
Oh, I was gonna say the vegans rule.
No!
Dang.
Eventually they
Two-tailed.
eat so much bamboo that they're just like, no, we're not going to reproduce. This is not a life I want for my children.
Yeah. And then
Why
they're just gonna
sleep
find a
ice
Fisher-Phil
cream.
cave and just keep falling down it.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a great
I
figure.
love that figure.
I
I show that in my taphonomy.
Yeah,
It's like the background and then a bunch of other slides.
Please pause this podcast and go and Google the taphonomy image with the panda falling in the cave.
And I found a really cute picture of a panda like going
Then
like
come back.
this,
What?
waving, and so I have that in the corner, and then just
Oh,
like
little
yeah,
waving
like,
And then
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Usually the one that's smiling and waving that you usually use for, do you really care about whether or not this panda lives or dies?
It
Doesn't
does.
come up if I say panda falling in cave.
Possibly.
I wrote
Maybe.
panda taphonomy and I think I found
You
it.
found it from panda to taphonomy?
We can hold it up.
It's got a nice little
Oh,
smiley
God.
face while it's
There's
tumbling.
also like a bloated pig.
Is a bloated pig in there too?
It's not my doing. I put that on the internet.
Should we talk about James
yeah.
and Curt's talks?
I can say
Or
what
do
I
you want us
learned
to
because
not
I
talk
don't
about it?
understand
The-
anything,
the
and you can
two
decide
other-
if you taught me well.
The two, maybe three.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, all right.
Is that
We don't want
dangerous?
to. We don't want to end with
Okay, I'm
us.
gonna show
so.
I'm gonna show the pandas to everyone
Yeah.
at home. Where's the actual thing?
It's just right.
This goes really well in an audio podcast. Thank you, Carlie.
We
Oh,
did
yeah.
this, we did
Well,
this.
wait,
Oh,
this
yeah.
isn't
Hang
true.
on,
You
hang
should
on,
do the
hang on.
Patreon.
One question.
Ad.
Who is here today?
Yeah, we need
I
to do
haven't
that.
met you yet.
No, hi, I'm Anna.
I'm Carlie. Nice to meet you.
Oh.
Alicia, you met Anna.
Yeah.
Did you meet Carlie?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
you
showed
told
me.
me.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
she
right.
was.
God.
Here yesterday.
I forgot that you were the glue that bound this whole thing together.
This is Brendan.
I'm Brenton.
Hi, Brendan.
I
Brendan,
show up
nice
at
to meet you.
GSA.
Who's this guy?
I was gonna say we haven't mentioned
James
James.
is also here. If you
Hello.
couldn't tell,
Yeah.
so happy to be here.
So, Alicia, what did you learn?
So, okay, so I missed I think the beginning of both of your talks.
Cool.
You're such a good friend.
Didn't go well.
I was doing things.
You mean like Alicia
You didn't come to
things?
my talk,
What? You had a talk?
so you didn't even know.
Was it on oil?
Was it during the session they had to chair though?
No.
Okay.
No. Was it any good?
Has it,
Hey.
The best.
has it happened yet?
It's hypothetical, so it is the best.
It's hypothetical.
So you didn't have a talk, and I knew you didn't have one.
You didn't know you didn't.
No, I asked you on the first day, are you doing anything here? And you went, no.
Yeah, you did. We did actually ask you that, and you said no, just here to visit.
You've been called.
To learn.
To learn.
Okay.
And I learned about genal spines becoming more pronounced with age,
Stanley.
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 and that the segmentation was repressed later in history.
Yeah.
Stanley.
There's,
No,
things become
you
more
can't-
pronounced with age, and then things are repressed over
Can't
history.
keep that
That's
joke.
The Triassic was very pronounced genal spines.
Wait, what?
Huh?
The Triassic was pronounced.
Yes.
That's how we define it. We just.
Sorry.
I beg to
The
differ.
whole age.
It was just a style thing, you know. It was like when everybody was doing that one earring thing. Now it's just a bunch of genal spines.
I'm very interested by the things you were picking up from my talk, because this is all kind of like ephemera.
No, I haven't gotten to the meaty part. I don't know if there is, but
Oh, by the way, Blair Van Valkenburg had a picture of an otter in her talk.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, it was 2 otters in a row,
And
and
a
I
weasel.
didn't know
Really
that this
cute.
is what we were supposed to bring to the party. So I apologized at the start of
No,
mine.
you had baby pictures.
I did, but I apologized for lack of otters.
yeah.
You did.
I
You
did.
do that.
You were looking at me like I didn't.
I'm just like thinking like everyone's gonna be real disappointed tomorrow. There's hardly any snails.
Tomorrow, there's snails. Should I put otters?
Yeah, I'm thinking like how
I
can
still
fit an
have
otter
time.
into my talk?
Have otters eaten snails?
I don't know how to do otters in 3D printing, but I will work it out by
The
tomorrow
trick is to
morning.
get them to stay still. But
Yeah.
No, you can CT them. You can do it with the.
if you
instead of
CT'd an
CT
otter, it'd just die.
Or be like just.
I irradiated this otter.
CT scan is not destructive. It's not human beings.
They did that to see if I was
from
ill or
moving.
not to make me ill.
James, you're confusing CT scan with synchrotron.
Oh, it's
Remember, synchrotron will kill it. CT won't.
Wait, so what
You
did I?
CT people.
What did I?
Yes.
You
Scan.
want to
What
live.
did I put my grandmother in?
But you have to say.
CT.
I don't know, James. What seems like your grandmother?
The truth comes out.
I don't know. I need to go and check.
Well,
So once again, should I
It's
dissociate
a
myself from this
taphotomy experiment
podcast?
here.
Wait, so what's an? I had an MRI and I'm here.
Yeah, that's
They're
also.
different
Okay.
things.
And
A
the
CT
CT
is
scan-
X-rays.
Yeah,
An MRI is magnetic resonance.
Yeah.
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 Both of them are non-destructive.
Non-destructive imaging
I don't know.
systems.
The MRI
sort
felt
of.
pretty destructive.
The
The
CT
CT
is
is
kind
the
of
one that they give you the
destructive, too.
dye that
Yeah.
makes you feel like you're gonna pee on
Yeah.
yourself, and then you're like, I
Okay,
have peed
yeah.
on myself. I'm convinced. And they're like,
Okay.
no, it's just the
Yeah.
dye.
I don't think I've had a CT like that. I did. Well, maybe I did with my gut. I had to drink barium.
no.
That's a barium
No.
swallow.
Okay, that one tasted interesting.
This is really appreciated. That's very strong. Ow, you haven't had that. It's like a high colonic, but you know.
We can talk about this off the
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that
You haven't lived
You haven't
until you've had a
lived.
barium swallow.
Actually, I will share. You haven't lived until you've been endoscoped
Oh.
while you're still awake.
Mm.
Oh.
You want to think about going to Mars and getting alien abducted.
It's pretty good. Have
Yeah.
you ever had your wisdom teeth removed while you're still awake?
Yes, I have.
All
I
right.
had
me
a
too.
tooth pulled when I was still awake.
I
And
hate
also-
impacted wisdom teeth.
And I still have them, and one day I'm going to plate them in gold and wear them as jewelry.
Ooh,
But-
nice.
Ooh.
Problem is, mine fell
Yeah, this
apart
is the
in
first group of
pieces.
people who's actually like
Yeah.
been
Carlie,
okay with
yeah.
that. All my other friends
I
are
know.
like, that's weird.
I know. I've still
Don't
got.
do
I've still
that.
got a bunch of my baby teeth.
I
Carlie,
would.
um, you had so much time with the PRI SEM, and
I could have
you
sputter
could have
coated them,
sputter coated
but they're
them.
still like A little
Could you have done a
gory.
micro-analysis on your
You're
teeth?
still a little
Yes.
gory. You haven't cleaned them yet.
So the
They
thing,
came to be sealed, and I'm not touching them until I'm ready to like actually.
Okay, so
the
so
thing about
Alicia,
like
what
butter
else?
cutting-
Definitely.
Where's that
Stuff
dog?
in Kansas.
There was one other paleo thing that I saw that was, and this is totally
Wait,
like
what did you
tangential.
think?
Wait. You had the genal spines and the
Oh.
Triassic, and then you
I
had
thought you
nothing
didn't
else.
like this.
No, I wanted to
No,
see
finish
more
it
of
off.
that.
Okay. And so then you had neoontonity,
Neon.
whatever,
Neotoma.
plus acceleration, and then you had a graph thing that was a heterochrony score, and there was pedomorphic at one end.
Okay,
and
did that seem
paramorphic at the other
revelatory
end.
to you?
Did it seem what?
Revelatory to you?
I understood at the end of the talk what was going on, but I didn't see the beginning. So maybe if I had had like
The big, the
the
big
overall,
You missed the otters is the problem.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that was
there would have been an otter.
that was
Yeah.
interesting because he was trying to make quantifiable something that's not generally quantifiable. Because usually when something's a mosaic, people just say it's mosaic, and so we're going to talk about it this way as being largely paramorphic or largely
Because there's a
pedomorphic.
combination.
Because it's a
Yeah.
combination, but James instead decided to call all of the traits that did have paramorphic or padomorphic expressions possible of equal value, and then see what the overall weight in the mosaic pattern was, and then he did
So
NK
essentially a
simulation.
+1, -1, or
Okay.
0 state.
Yeah, so of 20 or some number like that, characters that did have both expressions, which way did it go? And it was different than what could be expected at random, which was interesting because it was making Maffy something that isn't normally Maffy.
What animal group are we talking about?
That would be a good.
Xylopherans.
Xylophones!
You could do that. You could do heterochrony and xylophones. There's children's
Yeah,
ones
there
and
are.
there's
There's
ones.
Yeah.
lots of keys.
That's
lots of
the
Yeah,
the
I know.
method
Zip
test
assurance.
to show.
I like
Yeah.
it.
It's not
Zipassurance, not xylophones.
Wait, did I spell it right later? Oh, I did spell it right
Okay.
later.
James, just
Well, I
say
like
what's the name of the
xylophones.
group.
What's the group that we're talking about?
Ziphoshura or horseshoe crab.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And also Eurypterids,
Oh,
if
God.
Alicia got that far.
I did.
Me.
And so in
I
general,
said that there were two clades of Eurypterids that went freshwater,
Mm-hmm.
and that there were juvenile and larval forms that you showed us, and I wanted to look that up. The limbs.
What the larval form was? Or?
Yeah, I don't think I've looked at a larval form.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
have
I have a question
you
Have
seen
you
a
actually
child?
seen a baby?
of a Eurypterid.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question though. So you said
Fair.
you had
Fair.
juvenile and larval forms. Does the larval is the juvenile the first stage and then it becomes larval
No.
and then an adult? It's larval
You're
first.
a larva. First of all, you're a parasitic. Then you're born. Then you're a larva. And then after that,
Wait,
you
wait.
are
Are
juvenile. and then
Eurypterids
it's-
viviparous?
yeah, aren't they eggs?
I mean,
He was talking about human
I
beings.
know he was talking about humans.
they're probably eggs, but we have no definitive proof. Like they're eggs, but I mean, do you
Because-
want to have a nature paper?
Find the Eurypterid pregnant with Eurypterids?
Yeah.
I would love to do that. That would
Yeah.
be awesome. Unfortunately, it may not correspond to reality.
Oh.
It's a nature
Nature
paper.
paper.
Oh. That's true. Can
So-
we just
so
find
how-
some babies near
How
some
much
adults?
of this conversation do I just need to cut? I'm just saying right now.
Hey, we're not attacking anyone. Just a state of
Just
being.
science.
Look, we can just, instead of being critical, we'll just say, let's just look at the retraction rates of a bunch of journals.
Yeah.
Fair.
That's quantifiable, just like James made the heterochrony quantifiable.
We'll see.
So wait,
we'll see
what's
how
the
it will
answer?
work.
So yes,
Keep
what is
going.
the
Okay.
answer, please?
So the limbs
the love
were
of
more
God.
pronounced and bigger, and then
It's
you
critical
mentioned
to this
neontony and hypermorphosis,
Neontony.
and then I think I spelled it right here, xyphosterin.
Okay, better. Zipassurance.
Ziphosterin. I like xy.
Crabs.
Xylophore and xylophorite.
Variety.
Stylophorex
James,
is
James,
something different.
petition to change Zipassurance to xylophorite.
What, like we're gonna change flamingos to be called fuck off gold.
Yes, exactly.
They
No,
might like that.
they're pink. And then phylogenetics was a tool for evaluating ecological trends, and there was an ecological shift to freshwater, which I have an arrow pointing to morphological innovation in horseshoe crabs and Eurypterids.
Yay.
Is that acceptable?
kind
They're-
of.
I have a
Freshwater
legit
bushel
question
crabs?
that James
There were.
didn't take questions.
And what
Yeah,
time
neither
period
of
are we
you
in now?
Carboniferous and Triassic.
Oh!
They independently did
Yeah.
it twice.
What part of the Triassic?
All of it.
When does it start? Like in the early
Early
Triassic?
Triassic.
You find this?
Do you want to hear your talk?
Wait,
I
wait
have
a
a question.
So-
for
Oh,
James.
sorry.
Okay.
I missed that.
Yeah. So
Do any of the traits that are in the larvae that you can see as they're becoming more paedomorphic, like do any of those traits tell you something about differences in larval and adult ecology, and is that meaningful for freshwater?
We have larvae from like one species. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you were finding like some sort of heterochrony in the freshwater? Like what was yes?
So
Yes.
so
I
the
never
the
went
art.
to this talk.
So again, to try and make this again so that James, the person giving the
Yes,
talk,
I
does
know.
not actually explain it.
Here's a
It's just
chart
fine.
that I drew.
What James had found is that as you move into freshwater in both of these groups, Ziphoshurids and also Eurypterids, you find these unique looking groups, and they appear to have morphological shifts that are associated with either paedomorphosis
Okay.
or paramorphosis. So
Oh.
accelerating morphological growth or sort of getting juvenile traits into the adult.
Oh, I think I finally got your talk.
And one of the interesting things he found is that all of the
You
things
know what heterochrony is?
the clades that
Yeah,
tend to go through
yeah.
paedomorphosis
Yeah.
are the ones that are more species rich and actually speciate much faster. The clades
Your
that
glasses.
compared to the average of the actual number of species per million
Right,
years of
fine,
the group.
Okay.
And then when you have and then when you look at the ones that are going through
Oh, this is not too
paramorphosis, they
bad. I
tank
see.
their speciation rate,
Oh,
being
that's
dramatically
much better.
lower than the actual rate of than the
Okay.
rate given from the average.
Thank you.
No problem. It's gone.
You bet.
You see?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Kind of surprised.
My eyes aren't that bad. They're -2 on each side
Oh.
now. More
So
or
are
less.
they paramorphosis or paedomorphosis?
That's not how eyes work.
No, but it's minus.
It kind of is.
It was a
little
minus.
bit.
It was a -2 on
It's
the
a
chart,
little
though.
bit.
No.
It's
It's
a
like
little bit
underdevelopment or
paramorphic.
overdevelopment.
It's
squishiness.
it caps at -1, and also technically they'd be paedomorphic because I'm short-sighted. You become more long-sighted as you get older.
So am I super young?
Sure.
Yes.
No,
I'll
no,
go with that.
but you have to count that it's a lot of what's putting pressure on eye shape is skull shape changes that happen as you go into adult skull morphology as a teenager. So like that initial warping of the eye is coming from expressing more traits of adulthood.
Mm-hmm. But then the other reason you get long-sighted as you get older is because the muscles get tired.
Yeah. Big
Yeah,
chart.
so it's a different source
Yeah.
of the same poor
Yeah.
outcome.
Does that make sense? The muscles get tired?
Yeah.
Yes.
They do.
Yeah.
The focusing.
It relaxes.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to get
Don't
this.
think
I
about
don't get it.
They're
Don't think
done
about what it
taking
means for
care
your
of
heart.
this head.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, but there's a nun who runs Iron Man and she's doing fine.
Yeah,
so
'cause
like, what?
Because if,
Your
But, like,
eye
what
muscles
kind
are-
of muscle are
if
they?
you
Are they
fast
smooth muscle?
consistently,
What kind of muscle? You're
Your-
fasting? Who's fasting?
nuns. It's good for you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, they're
Intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fasting is good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
it's
But yeah,
Fasting and
cardiac
binging.
muscle's
it's not.
different.
It's not the same kind of
No,
muscle
fasting
system.
and eating
It's not
normally.
like you're
You
not
can't train
training
that.
it.
It's hard
Well,
to do.
Yeah.
We can straighten that.
people do suggest
There was
that,
yeah,
like,
there was
straighten
Most
one
of my
yeah,
weight
and
is
our
55
doctor who said
When you
diet.
realize you
Yeah,
should like
so
look at
I
something
was
far
like-
away so
Yeah.
they don't
This
know.
is
But
really
again, that
hard
was
for them
kinda
to
sketch.
tease out.
Yeah.
Yes, no, definitely. This is called crosstalk. It's a very bad choice.
We went from everyone talking at once to total silence.
Welcome to the replacement
Let's
for car
talk
talk,
about-
crosstalk.
Let's talk about Curtis's talk that I also didn't see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's
Did
a
you
thing.
see Curtis's talk?
I did.
Would you like to give the?
Okay, so I didn't see it because I didn't have my glasses on.
Okay.
but
Aw.
wait, let me.
You heard Curtis talk.
I did hear Curtis's talk. It was a
Did
lot.
heard Curtis
I
talk.
did
Yeah.
heard.
Did
It's in
hurt.
Central Pennsylvania.
Oh, why did I skip so many pages to write Curt? It's the void and then Curt again.
You goofed.
So the basis is as we chug that.
Yep.
The Andor division.
And or division, there's a mass extinction. You show the Sapkowski curve, as you do.
I have a
And-
nicer one if you want it.
I know everyone does.
And so you're saying that phylogeny is related to geography in that speciation is usually related to either barriers forming and dividing a population, or a population moving to a nearby but separated location. So therefore ancestral groups should be close by to the descended groups, and they're sort of related.
I mean, unless something very magical is going on, it's very hard for closely related, like for sister species to be.
Disperse long.
I was
distance,
thinking
but
you
yeah.
were about to say it's very hard for ancestors and descendants not to be related.
Very difficult.
I mean, biogeography is related to phylogeny, as in things have a place that they live.
And they,
Everybody.
the descendants are usually closer to the ancestors.
And they're often younger.
I
Weird.
Although I did see some Cal 3 stuff where the thing went up and then it diverged and then the range went backwards, and I did wonder about that, but I knew that was not
Did you
related to the
ever
actual
see?
talk.
Did you ever
No.
see the paper that described how
Nope.
Is that-
it
Alicia,
is-
don't do that.
Alicia, don't do that. It's gonna
Kind of
make
everyone
everyone
backlight.
glow.
I wanted to glow.
No, you don't. Okay. So
You got a natural glow.
Okay, but
Yeah.
this all to bring up. Did anyone ever read the paper that said it's adaptive for parents to be larger than offspring?
yes, yes. Oh my God, yes.
I like the face. Good face.
No,
Goodness.
Except for the frog.
Frog. Oh, with the tadpole as
Yes,
bigger. Yeah,
but
but that's
the tadpole doesn't-
intermediate.
And
Have
it also
to come
doesn't
out
come
of
out
the
that
adult.
size. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the egg is still
Yeah.
smaller than the adult.
So can I ask what the Endor division had to do with the biogeography and the phylogenies?
It happened at the Endor division. No, I literally wrote
Like, was
Endor
this a study
division.
across the boundary? Did
There's
just
a-
happen?
Some things went across the
After-
boundary, some things did not.
Okay.
Okay, so there was rapid unstable
We're
glaciation.
talking about brachiopods.
That's a good
That's a good
point.
start.
Good start. Yeah.
I was getting there.
No.
Biogeographic history mapped
Alicia
onto
is,
phylogeny.
Alicia is what you call in history an unreliable narrator.
Hey, I don't fully understand this.
All
There are-
narrators are
trying.
unreliable. It's just
This is why The
There's
Hobbit is
so
such an interesting book, because
Yes.
Frodo didn't
no,
really
but-
know what was
whoa.
going on. Not
Whoa,
Frodo, Bilbo
whoa,
didn't know what was going on.
whoa.
hey.
We can save this for a different podcast, but I have some of my thoughts about that. So, but we have 5 groups of brachiopods,
They're
And-
rapid-skeeted.
and one of them
Sucked.
extends into what?
Let her
What
say.
did you do it?
Did you just say sucks?
Yeah.
One group extends across the boundary and radiates, so you include those because you wanted to.
That is very close to how he said it.
You were kind of dismissive about it, and I wasn't sure why. I think they were the ones that were colored red.
Yeah, the ones that basically no, but because it was like, and so this is the lineage that actually gives rise to everything after the Silurian.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're like, so we included
So
them.
I guess we'll put them in. That
Yeah.
goes close
Yeah.
to that.
So, and they were in the middle of your phylogeny, but that doesn't really matter. But that's just where I remember it, the blurriness on the screen. And
Well, there was a blurry figure that you were looking at blurrily.
yeah,
Yeah.
Which doesn't matter because he highlighted in colors all
Yeah.
of the major clades.
And
Right.
they put gigantic skulls on them.
Yeah.
yes.
Because I'm metal.
So lots of things didn't make it, and that had to do with their.
No,
The
they
first
made it.
Intellid did
Oh.
not
And then they-
pass.
Died.
And they died again.
Wait, that's what it
That
says.
was good. That was very good.
That's what it says.
There was some icy Gandalf with a pole. Versatile shall not pass.
Just one weird
Yes.
flaming brachiopod just falls down.
The chasm.
And
Yes.
then after that, the other ones didn't do so good, except for one group was like, ooh, an opportunity. And in Curt's terminology, what gangbusters?
Yes.
Meaning radiated rapidly to a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, so where did biogeography come in?
The ones that
Wait, no, I remember this. Okay, so you
There
were
were
showing the map,
brachiopods on a map.
and then the ones.
a bunch were going back and forth forever.
Right, and the ones.
No, they were not, James.
Oh, no.
It's between the ones doing the electric slide left and right at the same latitude and the ones that would also disperse north-south.
Children, my master students might listen to this.
Why would you let them do that?
I can't control them.
Okay.
Once I open the box,
The
I can't
internet.
put it back in. You know, like
Okay.
Toothpaste
Yeah.
is
Well,
out.
but you didn't say any of this crazy stuff, so you still look professional.
we'll see.
It's
She
association.
understood what I was saying. So.
Anyway, the map, the trilobites, brachiopods,
Brachiopods. And was it the ones that were at the equator died off and then came back again, and the one that came back from
The dead. They
No,
rose.
she's gesturing. She
from the
means
south.
From the south.
Yeah.
Okay.
So brachiopods that were somehow
Yeah.
That's all I
near the
got.
equator survived and then re-radiated to the
No, the
northern
ones that were
hemisphere.
not
No,
near
it
the
was the
equator.
nine.
No,
survived.
the
They
ones.
were
So basically, there were
restricted
ones
to
that were
multiple.
everywhere, and
They
they
were
were back and
everywhere.
forth, and they were doing very dynamic. And then there were ones that are sort of limited in one area, and then they're the ones that sort of like stayed there and died. But then the ones that did very well were kind of like creepy little ones just hiding amongst them.
Yeah, but wasn't there
and
a
then they
second
sort of
one?
came out once. Yes,
There's
exactly.
a second group that was there that
Yeah,
then just
that
like
was hiding
Wait.
radiated
and
afterwards.
waiting to betray them.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
the ones
Judas.
in red.
So
Yeah.
things
The
in,
ones in
They were
red.
traitorous
so
tropical
things in the northern hemisphere
brachiopods.
that were constrained to the northern hemisphere or polar,
The
like
poles.
this absolute
Cosmopolitan distributions at the exchange event get restricted to the southern pole,
Okay.
and then radiate back out to a cosmopolitan distribution millions of years later.
Okay.
I
And
like
they
the fact,
persist for a long time.
Okay.
I like the fact we've driven Curtis to explain his own
Yes,
talk.
yes.
I'm sorry.
Is it? I thought this was all just like a challenge to see what
How
you'd be
long until you
forced
break?
to-
Yeah.
Am I the next victim?
I
What
think
was the
so.
talk
Is
about?
anyone at my
Wait,
talk
I
that
have one
doesn't
last thing
work
to
with
say.
Okay.
Okay.
I liked that you said at the end that you also want to compare it with sedimentology.
I do.
I like
But
that.
that's. I mean, you always say that
Well, yes.
just to appease people.
I-
Like I always go, and I'd love to look at biogeography.
Oh, that's why you keep me around.
Well, I mean, I would love to look at biogeography, but it's the thing that always ends up getting cut for time. So
Yep, that seems about right. So Brendan's talk.
yeah,
Alicia, did you see Brendan's talk?
didn't.
I
Oh.
spaced out on a bit of this, but there were baby ones, and you had SEMs of the dead babies.
Wait, what?
Which of your three talks was
I mean,
this?
I guess that's sort of
Which of
true,
your
but
three
they were
talks?
they still keep their baby
Oh, I
shells
thought
when
you
they're
were-
growing.
you're
so
going to dismiss it and
basically,
say you
you're
only
just
get
looking
three
at the milk
talks.
teeth.
I'm looking at the milk teeth
Yeah.
that they never lost. That's
Yeah.
correct.
This is the abrupta protocon talk.
No, I didn't do abruptus. There is no abrupta prototongue. It doesn't exist.
Okay, it
If
doesn't
you
exist.
protocon, please send it to me because
Oh, what now?
The
Turritella
larval-
abrupta is an obsession because it's a giant,
You've
really
been
rapidly growing
begging for
turritella.
this for
And
like
the
I've been-
30
protocon
years.
is the larval stage, so you can tell a lot about its reproductive
Okay.
history.
And also
But
in
it's broken off the
what
tip.
it's related to.
So if I'm on that,
He
Yeah.
just needs the tip.
just one.
I need
Just
just the
the
tip.
tip.
Just the tip.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Deep moving up. What was the actual talk about today?
No, they're supposed to
Yeah,
do it,
I'm
right?
not
I'm not
asking you,
supposed to
I'm
do
asking
that.
I didn't see it.
it was very. My notes are just Brendan scrawled really broadly.
Ooh,
Like
okay.
it's just the name.
Is
Brendan
that all
scrawled
you wrote?
really
What was
broad.
the title?
It is all that
Somebody
he
answer,
wrote.
it's not Brendan. Maybe I can divine it.
The thing I remembered
So
him
you
saying
specifically
was
whether
that
it's got a large oak or a small oak, a yolk in the egg sac based on the
He's got a large oak.
large yolk.
this storyteller is endowed with a large tree.
What a
In
great.
a wonderful example of commensalism across biomes.
The unfortunate fact, however,
It can
is
pass
that
it down generation to generation until they decide to cut it down for wood, and then they have nothing to pass to their
Oh
next
wait, did I
generation.
take you to a talk that talked about the Paleo Lake guy that ended up accidentally cutting down Prometheus, at that point the
Oh.
oldest tree? They talked about his career, so I didn't know that going in, but
Yeah, he's a grad student. He cored it. And
Yeah.
He died.
well, he cored it and then it broke off his coring, so he asked the Forest Service like, "Hey, I'm a grad student, I need this back," and they're like, "Yeah, I cut it down to get it back," and then they counted the rings.
how it happened.
Yeah. And then all the environmental people went like batshit crazy on him. And
Well, now they don't tell you where the oldest tree is in Bristol
Yeah.
Forest
Yeah.
anymore, so you
Which
can't.
seems like it should be more dangerous, but probably isn't.
Probably not, actually.
Yeah. So what was the title of my talk?
Protoconch enlargement in western Atlantic turritellini gastropod species following the closure of the Central American Seaway.
Yes, because the basically the upshot, and I'm sorry if I'm ruining it by talking about this first, is that you said so basically stuff that's on the Pacific side is dying and is
Other way around is the Atlantic
Okay,
side.
stuff
It's
the Atlantic
because
because
the
it could-
Atlantic died.
yeah, because there's not enough resources and they don't have a big yolk, and so they're just going to starve to death eventually. But it's okay because there's plenty more elsewhere, so we can just get more. And so I did ask
They're
you.
living in other places, so we don't really care if they go extinct.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just guessing. I wasn't there.
I mean,
I just know something
I-
about this extinction.
I did
I'm just
wonder-
making
Here's the
shit up.
thing.
I
I
did
think
wonder-
Brendan was being sardonic when he was saying it's okay if they all
I
die
did-
if we can just
I-
get more.
I did
If we
wonder-
That's
put more
called
time,
a
we
joke.
care.
I did wonder if you were advocating us getting buckets of turritella and just chucking them in the Atlantic.
No,
to re-
really? Canals there. We don't
Yeah.
have to work so hard.
No, but I mean, yeah, there's
Wait, let him keep going before you fill
Okay,
it in for
all
him.
right.
Yeah,
You were there, weren't you?
Please care about them. Care about the snails.
Yeah.
I was just looking at biases and survivorship between what type of yoke strategy you have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the opposite of what I said.
So only the large yolks.
Yard jokes.
Yard
Yard jokes.
Yard
Yard jokes. Yard
Yard
joke, miladies.
Only those survived in the Caribbean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And the
There you go.
fascinating and important aspect is that, I mean, you had a tree with like what? Mitochondrial DNA, multiple nuclear sites as well to run through your analysis. And then you also ended up with, what was it, 8 numbers of protoconchs with like what, 4 species in one group and 6 in one and like 2
There
species.
only are 4 species though, so that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
That's the survivors.
Yes.
But you had 2 different clades that were showing similar trends, but then the most interesting thing was you had a couple of geminate pairs, which are sister species that have been divided by the thing, and you could see repeatedly that each one on each side was
Yeah, so you
starting to
had
respond the
2
same way.
separate clades that were evolving this individual character, and they were showing similar characteristics despite they were different. They were not closely related.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
a good upshot.
Yeah.
That's why it fit in your session.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
totally. It's almost as though it's very similar to what James's talk was,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's almost like we put them together for a reason.
which is almost why we did that.
What was
Yeah.
the name of your session?
Phylogenetic
Paleoecology.
Oh,
Macroevolution in a
within.
Phylogenetic framework.
yeah.
Yay. Yes, and I was just trying to make my poor advisor feel better because the end of my talk is there's 2 clades of turritella in the Western Atlantic, and they're probably both doomed in the long term evolutionarily because they've had to shift to having large protoconchs, which means short dispersal distances, and they're probably not likely to speciate. And so since there's only 2 left and they're not close relatives of each other and they're not likely to give rise to new species long term, they're probably doomed in the Western Atlantic.
Okay.
Even without us.
Hooray!
So eat them while you can.
Yeah, for once, it's not our fault.
I don't think you do. I don't think you eat turritellas.
I
They
bet they
do.
do.
They do? Okay.
Yeah, and the places that they eat them, it's so much easier to get them for molecular analyses because someone bothers
Well,
to
of
collect
course.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And you just have to tease apart all the garlic. I presume they eat them with garlic.
Well, you usually buy them at the fish market, and you don't buy them pre-garlic.
Actually,
That would really mess up the analysis.
There's a lot of. There's a lot of.
garlic.
So,
One
so
turritella is a
it-
plant.
actually, do you know what?
It's weird that we're putting this out as a bovid.
No, I'm very interested actually to like take burgers you buy in France and do the genetics and see how many of them are horse versus how many of them are actually like a cow animal or a closely
animal.
related.
There's
Species.
an animal called a beefalo. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a half cow, half
Yeah.
buffalo.
You get like the best of everything.
I know,
Yeah.
like a beefalo, really?
So
Weird
the
that
problem
weird.
that with the snails is that the
What do you
a
prefer?
lot of them
Buffalo-
get
even
parasites, and the
Hamburgo?
parasites are better with the
buffalo? You don't
primers.
refer to it by the
I was
food.
trying to
You
listen
call
to
it
really
beef.
hard.
I
It's like when
know.
I'm in the back of the room and someone's coming in and out and I'm like, I can't focus on what's going on in front of
You're
them.
Yeah.
halfway there with beef. You might as well
So they don't usually come
call
out
it a
as
burger
cows.
row.
But there were snails and ribosomal DNA.
Wasn't
We're
Frida
so
Kahlo
close,
just called
y'all.
a
We're
hamburger?
so close.
I didn't
Alright.
do any ribosomal DNA.
No, there's no
Close.
ribosomal.
Mitochondrial and nuclear.
I'm just
Yeah,
I
trying.
didn't
I'm just
do
trying
it.
to get it back on.
No, I mean I guess I did
And multiple
Subunit.
nuclear sites too. So
no opposite.
opposite multiple
Yeah, multiple
mitochondrial sites.
mitochondrial and one nuclear.
Okay.
But the thing I was going to, they don't usually come out as cows, but they very often will come out as worms because they get parasites, and the parasite DNA is closer to the primer that you use, so it
Okay.
preferentially
Oh.
amplifies the parasite.
Oh, wow.
I thought this was like, yeah.
So if you are
I'm
working
curious
on
if
a
cutting
snail
into
or a
mollusks
clam
is
and it
Well, you said coming
shows
out
up
of it, like,
as a
bird.
worm,
Oh, okay.
it's not your fault.
And so you need to be really worried if you do your hamburger and that shows up as a worm.
It could.
Yeah.
I mean, but no, you
Sure
might not
are.
be that worried because it might just be the one, but the primer matches the worm more than it matches the cow.
Yeah.
It's not likely to
makes
be
sense.
mostly worm. It's likely.
Yeah, but I
that-
mean, if worms are parasites, you want your hamburger to be
But-
precisely zero worm.
Yeah.
It's
No,
good.
I mean like
So you cook it all the way.
it's like
Yeah.
no fish that's zero worm. You just have to accept a little bit.
Yeah.
God, I'm so glad to be vegetarian in this exact.
Oh, there's
context.
no wheat that's not zero rat.
I would say also like that one time I've been to
Oh,
an apple and it
God.
was 100% worm. That was a bad day.
Yeah.
So
Pack lunches for your baby snails.
yes,
That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
That's cute.
So what? Who wants to talk about something next?
I have something very short. There is a lot of things about building stones, and there was one about millstones in Ohio,
Oh, cool.
and they are primarily made out of chert. And the ones that are made out of Ohio stone are chert with some limestone, and they're kind of brown.
With the other
But-
one's limestone and some shirt.
Um, anyways,
You and-
they had some really nice ones. Well, rather, they imported millstones from France, which kind of blows my mind, and they're actually segmented, which I don't know how it would stay together, but it does. But they have charophyte fossils in them, and that's how you can identify the French millstones from the Ohio millstones, which I thought was kind of neat.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I guess you can also see like where the canals are in Ohio, like the French stones were transported or something.
Very cool.
I went to the talk where they're talking about how they're selecting the landing site for the 2020 Mars rover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So apparently it's like in its final decision, like the count where they had all the meetings and everything,
Yeah.
and they narrowed it down. So they have 4 different sites, and they just sent off like all their info to those sites to like the person at NASA who will make the final decision. So.
Okay.
The landing site's going to be wherever it falls after the engine fails in the upper atmosphere, right?
No.
There's
It's
an
gonna
intended
bounce
landing
and-
site.
Yeah.
I don't know if this one's gonna bounce or not.
Is it going to land on top of the old one? Like directly?
No, just like
that seems like
perfectly.
wouldn't be the point. I'm assuming they want to go someplace the other one can't
Yeah.
get to.
No,
Yeah.
so
Well,
lay it
it
on
can't-
top of
the
the
other
old
one
one
won't be
and
able
then
to
ollie
anymore.
off of it.
So,
I did see the
Do a quick Benny Hanna.
Europa lander poster yesterday that was in the hot section.
Oh.
So that's a thing that's going to happen, maybe again.
did you reckon the one that's got C's, or is that Io?
Yes,
Yeah, Europe is the
Io
one.
is lava.
Yes, Io is being squeezed, and
They're a
So
Robert
Europe
Frost
is
poem.
Europe
Robert
is-
Frost poem.
Europa is also technically being squeezed because otherwise you wouldn't have liquid water
Yeah.
in Europa.
Uh-huh.
It's just it's being squeezed less than
They're
Io.
being tidally
so
deformed.
is Io so Europa is being compressed, and so is the water going to be superheated?
So
No,
so
no.
the idea is that tidal
in
deformation
McDonald's.
is causing partial melting inside of the inside of the rock part of Europa, and therefore allowing for there to be hydrothermal vents, which then causes the ice to be melted and form liquid water underneath the ice caps of Europa.
There is also tidal heating of just
Yeah.
the water icy slushy section.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel bad now because we're having a
Cool.
conversation and I really don't care about it right at this moment.
Okay, well if there's a Eurypterid living on Europa, we'll come back to it in a future podcast.
Yeah, and we'll we'll segment it after we'll do many things
Segment
to it.
it.
And we're
Will you
gonna-
put it in a CT scanner?
Yeah,
Would you put it in a
We'll do many
synchrotron?
things. I mean,
Might do that too.
I don't need to
Why
eat my
not?
study organism because I've
You don't need to see your steady organ.
Study organ.
Because
that
I
your
get
brain?
sick.
Brain.
I
I know.
That's how you get leprosy.
No,
Well,
you
it's
get
like the
leprosy
prion
many different
diseases.
ways. But because I've already
If you
eaten
eat your own brain, you have another problem besides leprosy or
Well, I
prion.
mean, okay, that was not Red Dragon. What was that? That was Hannibal.
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
movie
In Hannibal, he
Yeah.
fed him his own brain. Not a part he needed.
Yeah.
I mean-
fava beans.
No, somebody else.
That's his
That's
secret.
actually a joke about psychiatric medicine, which I didn't learn until only a couple of years ago. Where it's all it's Chianti and fava beans are both things that you're not allowed to have on antipsychotics.
Oh, okay.
Why not the beans?
I don't know. It's something in it. It interacts with some of the medicines
bet
that
they're
were common at the
high
time when
thyroid
it was
foods.
written.
Okay.
But no, we would
Now you
dissect
know.
erythrids and do many interesting experiments on them.
So, I don't know, we saw some
About that.
talks on reptile changes in
Body-sized
environmental
paper.
shifts
That
over
was right
time.
at the end of the day.
Biogeography stuff.
All
Yes.
afternoon.
1 to 5.
We're still gonna have.
And one of the cool ideas that apparently while the global climate has been cooling, a lot of reptiles have been moving towards warmer temperatures throughout the history of our planet, of the last 2 million years of our planet.
Yeah, so the reptiles are going to take over the world. It will literally be the lizard people.
That's-
Are they all moving there because that's also where the mosquitoes are, and that's the only defense against humans?
Mosquitoes.
Well,
They're teaming up.
mosquitoes, there are only two things that can kill a human, mosquito or another human.
I think you mean the most endangered species in the universe,
Right.
Lilo and Stitch.
I've never seen Lilo and Stitch, and I kind of don't
That
really
was
them.
really good.
I think you would like Stitch.
What?
It's cute.
You need to do a podcast as
What,
Stitch.
just me doing Stitch?
Yeah, that would be cute.
Don't encourage him. Oh god.
626.
Look, he thinks
You
he's
get to be
cool
Stitch,
now.
I get to be Gollum.
That's very good, Gollum. That's pretty good. It's not bad, Gollum.
Are you going?
Yeah.
Are you
See?
cosplaying?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry, I was
I could
mistaken.
totally do that. Just like
Yeah.
crawl around the museum at night. Just
Oh my
God.
god. They'll just find you like on a
that and
gargoyle.
the beefy wolf. I don't even know you.
We got to be careful about the beefy wolf because people might find it attractive and start googling it a lot. So,
I mean, if you type in Beefy Wolf into Google, you will find things. You will find things that will not look
I
like
don't
what we're
think we
talking
wanna
about.
like
see
the beefy
that.
Oh, I'm
squirrel.
doing it.
No.
We were going to talk about a science thing.
No, the
Let's end with some science.
the sort of the interesting aside of this was kind of getting at
Yeah.
one of the big disconnects that we're sort of seeing in modern biology versus the fossil record in some ways, but kind of the inverse of it. But basically saying that on a short time scale you don't see an adaptation because stuff's happening too fast.
Yes.
And then basically evolution becomes important over long time periods. And so scale does matter in this kind of...
So what she was doing, she was looking at environmental shifts over the last 2 million years compared to environmental shifts we see today. And this is a growing trend when you're talking to any climate scientists. What we're seeing today, even if the extent is not nearly as bad as it was maybe 30 million years ago, the actual rate at which that change is occurring is so dramatically fast as to be unfathomable to most biological life.
Yeah.
So it's even though lizards were able to survive much more dramatic shifts over the last few ice ages in greenhouse conditions, or at least icehouse glacial conditions, not greenhouse, I should say. Glacial interglacials is what I meant. They're still not necessarily going to be able to adapt to the rate at which things are changing right now. But that being said, it was interesting to see that the growing trend as we continued throughout the sort of later part of the Cenozoic of increasing global cooling over time, which has been the general trend throughout the Cenozoic until now, is that lizards and snakes and reptiles and all those great little things have been moving towards warmer climates in response to global cooling, and I think that's fascinating.
They'll be there to meet us in Phoenix.
Yes, lots of them. Lizards are cute.
Yeah.
They're all over Raleigh.
Blue-tailed ones?
They're skinks, yeah, blue-tailed skinks.
They bite each other's heads off.
But now they're migrating back. Now there's like
They
crocodiles in
should.
South Carolina.
Well, there's crocodiles in the coast near Raleigh too.
These
Well,
are
not Raleigh, but
alligators.
close to your North Carolina.
Alligators.
We have
Yeah.
both.
South
We could
Carolina.
be.
They're alligators.
They are
Yeah,
alligators.
they're alligators.
Yeah.
They used to
Pretty
be.
sure there's like a legend one made it to Kansas.
Alright, so
okay,
we had
Kansas
we had
claims every
alligators.
Yeah.
We had alligators 2 summers ago. You were there, right? We had
Also,
alligators in Ithaca because somebody like dumped theirs.
Oh.
Wait, what?
Somebody
Where?
dumped their pet alligators, not in
Aw.
Ithaca, but very nearby,
Oh, I
near
was like, I was swimming in
like
that
near
lake.
Watkins Glen. Not in that. No, not in the lake. Somebody, and it came across on the radio. Local radio. It's like, so if you see an alligator or something you suspect might be an alligator, it might actually be an alligator. Please call the New York Department of Environmental Conservation, and we will send someone to find it. Because there were 2 alligators missing in separate incidents in the same summer, 2 summers
Aw.
ago. Not either from the same person, but released separately, or
Yeah.
from separate people. But they caught one, and then they had to catch another one in the same summer in Ithaca. To spare them our cold winter.
That's why occasionally you got to be careful because people like to get alligator snappers as pets, and they just chuck them out when they start to get too big, and then they get bigger, and so there are alligator snappers sometimes in lakes in England.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, there are also lots of mink, and mink are actual bastards.
Aw.
So
Should have made Molly coats.
That was
I
cool.
mean, they were going to, then they got released by Peter and other people. And I mean, mink are great because they're mustelids, but they also love to murder birds. So
Then we saw Jen's talk,
yeah,
which was a lot of. These are some really cool weird blastoid things.
yeah. Here's all the ecology. There's no discernible
Yeah,
trends.
yeah.
Wait. There's no discernible trends in what? Blastoid ecology?
Yeah,
Across the tree.
yeah.
Yeah. All
Like,
pretty
like
random.
they
Just random.
branch out and they just do
Just
who
do
knows
things.
what.
So that there was a general trend towards shallow water. Like everything was almost shallow water, and it was just randomly experimenting with different environments. It was mostly shallow carbonates.
What are their
exclusively.
different ecologies?
Well, the morphologies are like pyramid head, fat,
Yeah.
like egg shaped.
But how many different things do they do with that? No offense.
Don't know.
The clade.
Again, don't know.
This is why I sort of said so. They like, is this having an influence on feeding ecology? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
But how that then is going to relate to whether they need certain environments or not is not clear. So
And then there was Lucy's talk,
yes,
which was kind of awesome.
I liked your talk.
scale dependent again.
That was entirely about seeing whether or not there were discernible tracers of phylogenetic structure on community assembly.
In the San Joaquin Basin.
So essentially, are things that are invading successfully in a community, are they more similar than expected to the things that are in there already? Or due to sort of a Darwinian competitive exclusion, are they more different than would be expected?
Both of which are completely inconsistent hypotheses that people argue for.
Yes, consistently.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that in all instances and across multiple statistics, the answer was nothing.
Yeah,
There
there's
was
this,
no
like,
discernible difference.
there's this nice gap in the middle. She had this figure where I was like, it's either this or this, and then it ... and here's the bit where there's nothing, and it could be anything, and that's where it kept going.
All the data, yeah.
Another thing with it is in the
What
fossil
animal
record,
group and time period?
mollusks
Bivalves
in
Pleistocene, I thought, wasn't it?
oh no.
Or maybe it's the
It was
Cenozoic
when
in
it
general.
was when the San Joaquin
Oh yeah.
basin was opened, and it has a narrow channel, and it was marine and connected by a little channel.
Oh right.
So it's
yeah.
whenever that formed.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed the geology bit. I
Thank
was
you.
interested in the ecology bit. But when
Like the coast ranges are probably Miocene.
Yeah.
The San Andreas formed in the Miocene.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
because
my-
it was
Sometimes-
essentially it was in the process of being closed by the San Andreas.
I don't want to listen to this and not know my exact color.
okay, so sometime in the Cenozoic, in the
It's Miocene.
Cenozoic,
That's when
Probably
the San Andreas
Miocene.
formed.
okay,
But when the coast ranges became big enough to cut the San Joaquin Basin off from.
Yeah, and so it's in the process of just before that point.
yeah, and yeah, so the answer was
So possibly plasma.
whether you were related to whatever was in there or not didn't seem to affect your ability to successfully get in and then be established for some time. And if you got established and then disappeared and were only in the outside of the basin and then got in again, that was counted more than once.
Well, the one thing though that she did do as a massive caveat, which I think is important, is how much then does phylogenetic diversity actually tell us about ecological similarity, which sort of is an important question to consider here.
Yes, she had a wonderful post-conclusions discussion.
Which is effectively another paper.
Yeah, about the caveats and things that needed to be considered, and it was very interesting and very good post-conclusions talk in a talk, which you don't see very often. Yeah, and I mean, one thing with it is if you see it in the fossil record, it got established enough that there was something there that became a fossil.
Yeah, so it's probably more established than a lot of things that we see around.
So like maybe something that was like the exact identical niche came in and couldn't form a population, but that's just me internalizing Greg Deedle. Because I know that's what he would say, because when he talks about invasion, he's like, yeah, if it's in the fossil record, it got established. But I liked her.
I mean,
I like
but
Lucy's interpretation better.
but also she had a global data set, and then she pruned it to the things that were in that area. So just because we had a fossil for it doesn't necessarily mean we only had a fossil for it because it was also in the same area and also invading. And furthermore, she divided up the San Joaquin Valley into individual areas that you could then look and see invaders versus non-invaders, and then model the probability of invaders versus random. Like that's what she did.
Yeah.
So something could still evolve in one area and then invade later on.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I was just going back to your, if we see a fossil, it can't be an invader because it proves it was established or something.
No, that's...
No, it proves it was
No, I mean,
invaded
it
and
proves
became
it
established.
became
Yeah.
established if you find it once. It was established enough.
Enough to be
Yeah.
preserving
Present,
fossil. Well, but the question is then, so it got established. Was it more closely related than expected or less closely related
No,
than
all
expected?
the rest of that's still cool.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry. I won't
I
mention
feel
it
like we
again.
circled fully back.
I feel like we did.
That's because it was a good talk. Generated discussion. And we all liked it, right?
And it was the point just before the break, so there was actually time for questions.
Uh-huh.
Squares make a circle.
All squares make a circle. All these squares make a circle.
Anyone have anything else from today?
No.
Not really.
Do you have anything from another day? Since you're joining us now?
She was here on the first day,
That's
Brendan,
you.
and I'm really
Oh.
sorry to tell you that.
She's
Never
her
mind
replacement
then.
you.
Alright. You just collect all the short people. Got it?
Yo.
We'll do a Lord of the Rings podcast and we won't mention you.
Are you Pippin?
Ooh, that's a good question, I guess.
Okay.
Not Fatty Bulger, who doesn't go on the adventure.
Who's a really grumpy one?
Tom Bombadil.
No. One who steals all the forks. Lobelia.
Yeah.
Lobelia something. That's me.
Okay.
She's enslaved, subjugated by Saruman.
That's true.
It's a good way to end this. Does
Yeah.
anyone have anything
Yeah.
else they want to talk
Yep.
about? No, okay, so we're just ending it on enslaved by Saruman. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it goes these
It's
days.
how you
There
feel
is
during
one
election
more
night.
day.
Oh.
We can escape.
Really?
I mean, we're here tomorrow, Curtis.
No. I'm talking about escaping. Can we?
Yeah.
Okay. No.
Nope, it's not over for me.
It's the long defeat. We know the inevitable victory after the long defeat.
What? I don't think victories are inevitable after a long defeat.
That's a hell of a split, Curtis.
I know. Pretty
So
limber.
flexible.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.